What if I told you that there's a timeless well of wisdom hidden in plain sight, overlooked by many, yet overflowing with answers to life's biggest questions? Picture a book that doesn't just inspire you for a moment, but lays down a foundation for lasting change. A guide that speaks to the soul, whispering clarity in a world full of noise. Questions like, how do I live with integrity? Who can I truly trust? Where do I find peace that endures? This isn't pop psychology or another trending life hack. It's the book of Proverbs, an ancient, divinely inspired treasure. More than a collection of sayings. It's a blueprint for living with purpose, discernment, and spiritual depth, and it's been waiting for you to discover its power. Let's be honest. Most people don't really know what to do with the book of Proverbs. To some, it feels like a dusty collection of old sayings, clever, maybe helpful, but not exactly life-changing. But what if I told you Proverbs is much more than just a list of do's and don'ts? What if I told you it's a spiritual roadmap, a divine blueprint that cuts through the surface of our lives and gets to the heart of who we are? You see, Proverbs doesn't just give you advice. It holds up a mirror. It reveals the crossroads we all face every day, choices that shape our character, guide our decisions, and ultimately determine the kind of legacy we'll leave behind. These aren't random quotes to pin on your wall. They are holy insights designed to align your soul with God's eternal wisdom. Too often, we chase inspiration that fades by lunchtime. We scroll through social media for motivation, listen to voices that tell us what we want to hear, and consume content that scratches the surface but never touches the soul. Meanwhile, Proverbs sits quietly, waiting to speak not just to our circumstances but to our inner world, our patterns, our desires, our fears. This book was never meant to be skimmed. It was meant to be absorbed. It was written to awaken you to something greater, to shift your perspective from temporary fixes to eternal foundations. Proverbs doesn't just suggest better behavior. It calls you to become someone new, someone rooted in truth and shaped by God's character. The wisdom found here is alive. It doesn't expire. It doesn't go out of style. In fact, it becomes more relevant the more chaotic the world becomes. And here's the truth. When you allow God's wisdom to guide your decisions, you don't just live a better life. You begin to walk in divine purpose. You find clarity where there was confusion, peace where there was anxiety, and strength where you once felt weak. Imagine starting each day not with noise, but with the calm strength that comes from knowing you're building your life on something solid. That's the power of Proverbs. It's not about being perfect. It's about being prepared spiritually, emotionally, and mentally for whatever life throws your way. So before you press play on another self-help podcast, or scroll through another list of morning affirmations, consider this. What if you began your day with the words of God Himself? What if, instead of relying on temporary motivation, you fed your soul with timeless truth? That's what we're doing here. Together, we're going to explore Proverbs, not just verse by verse, but theme by theme, breaking down the deep, often overlooked treasures buried in these short but powerful statements. You'll get practical guidance, yes, but more importantly, you'll receive a spiritual foundation that can withstand life's storms. And by the end of this journey, you won't just think differently, you'll live differently. You'll walk with a sense of purpose. You'll see through the lies of this world. You'll begin to trust the voice of wisdom over the noise of the crowd. So if you're ready to grow in faith, to sharpen your discernment, and to reconnect with the heart of God, this is your moment. Grab a notebook, open your heart, and let this ancient book guide your modern life. If you find these insights helpful, share them with someone you care about. Because the truth is, wisdom isn't something we're meant to hoard, it's meant to be shared. It's a gift, a light, a call back to the way we were always meant to live. Welcome to the journey. Welcome to Deep Bible Stories. Let's rediscover Proverbs not as a relic of the past, but as a living guide for today. But Proverbs is so much more. This isn't just an ancient text full of life hacks or moral guidelines. The book of Proverbs is a divinely inspired manual for living a life rooted in truth, honor, and humility. It's not meant to sit on a shelf collecting dust. Proverbs is alive, calling us to understand life in a way that is deeper, truer, and more connected to God's heart. Let's go back to the beginning. Tradition holds that much of Proverbs was written by King Solomon, a man known for his God-given wisdom. Solomon didn't ask for wealth, fame, or power. He asked God for wisdom to lead and understand his people. And because Solomon's request pleased God, he was granted a wisdom unmatched by any other. Proverbs, then, is a glimpse into that wisdom, a collection of insights from a man gifted with divine understanding. But Proverbs isn't just about Solomon. It's about the Spirit of God moving through these words, offering insight and guidance that speak directly to our souls. Each proverb is a condensed lesson, a single line that can pierce through to the heart. They're like seeds, small but packed with the potential to transform us from the inside out if we let them take root. Imagine a book that isn't limited to time or culture. A book that was relevant thousands of years ago and is still uncannily relevant today. Proverbs tackles the issues that never change: how to live with integrity, how to choose friends wisely, how to guard our hearts, how to handle money, relationships, anger, pride, and so much more. It covers everything we struggle with, but it goes beyond simple solutions. Proverbs shows us how to walk in God's ways, to live with divine perspective, and to navigate life with His wisdom guiding us. At its core, Proverbs is an invitation to wisdom. But it's not just any wisdom. It's the wisdom that begins with the fear of the Lord. This book is here to guide us not only in what we do, but in who we're becoming. It's like a mirror reflecting our actions, our motives, and our desires back to us, challenging us to live lives that are in alignment with God's character. So, as we dive into the teachings of Proverbs, remember, this isn't just a book of advice. It's a blueprint for a life that's rooted in eternal truths, meant to grow us into people who reflect the goodness, strength, and love of our Creator. What does it mean to be wise? To walk through life with understanding, purpose, and clarity. Proverbs tells us that all true wisdom begins with something that sounds unusual: the fear of the Lord. Proverbs 1:7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." But what does this fear really mean, and why is it so essential? To understand the weight of this phrase, we need to consider the life of the man who wrote it, King Solomon. Solomon wasn't just any ruler. He was the son of David, chosen by God to lead Israel, but he didn't start his reign by amassing power or wealth. Instead, Solomon asked for something that pleased God deeply. He asked for wisdom so he could lead his people well. In 1 Kings 3:9, Solomon prays, "Give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong." And God granted Solomon wisdom, unlike anyone before or after him. Solomon was given divine insight that went beyond human understanding. His wisdom became famous, drawing leaders from nations far and wide to seek his counsel. And yet, with all his knowledge, Solomon's writings continually emphasize that true wisdom begins not with intelligence or experience, but with a reverent fear of the Lord. This fear isn't terror. It's an awe that overwhelms the soul. It's the awareness that we stand before a holy, all-powerful Creator who knows the depths of the universe, who sees every hidden motive, and who governs with perfect justice. To fear the Lord is to understand that God is infinitely greater than we can comprehend, and yet, incredibly, He invites us to draw near to Him. The book of Ecclesiastes, another of Solomon's writings, reveals the inner struggles Solomon faced even as he pursued wisdom. Ecclesiastes shows a man who sought pleasure, success, and knowledge, only to conclude that without God, it was all meaningless. Solomon declares in Ecclesiastes 12:13, "Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind." He had learned firsthand that wisdom apart from God's truth led to emptiness. But why is this fear of the Lord the foundation of wisdom? Because it sets everything in its rightful place. The fear of the Lord is a recognition that we are not the center of the universe. God is. It's a humbling realization that all human knowledge is limited, that our understanding is a shadow compared to God's light. This fear, this reverence, makes us teachable, ready to receive truth that transcends our limited perspective. In the book of Sirach, a banned book from the traditional canon but treasured in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, we find a similar insight. The beginning of wisdom is to fear the Lord. She is created with the faithful in the womb. Sirach 1:14. Sirach reveals that this wisdom, born from the fear of the Lord, is woven into the hearts of those who seek God earnestly. It is not learned through human efforts, but gifted by God to those who approach Him with reverence. Imagine for a moment standing before the throne of God, seeing His glory that no human eye can bear, sensing His power, His purity, His holiness. This is the kind of awe that Proverbs calls us to have. It's a fear that brings us to our knees, that makes us aware of our own limitations and our desperate need for God's guidance. For Solomon, this wasn't just a theory. His life illustrates the rise and fall of wisdom. In his early years, Solomon followed God closely, seeking divine wisdom above all else. But later, Solomon's heart grew divided as he pursued wealth, foreign alliances, and even idolatry. The very man who wrote, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom," would stray from that foundation, led astray by pride and distraction. The book of Ecclesiastes captures his later reflections. A man who had it all but realized he had lost his way without God's wisdom anchoring his life. This is why Proverbs starts with the fear of the Lord. It's a warning, a call to remain grounded, to remember that all wisdom, all knowledge, all understanding begins and ends with God. Without the fear of the Lord, even the wisest can lose their way. In today's world, we are taught to believe that wisdom comes from within, that the answers are found in self-discovery, or the latest trend, or a successful career. But Proverbs challenges us to start with humility, to admit that we are not the source of wisdom. God is. Only when we acknowledge His authority, His holiness, His sovereignty, do we open ourselves to receive true wisdom. In Proverbs, relationships are never treated as casual or unimportant. Every person we let into our lives, every influence we allow, is like a thread in the fabric of our spiritual journey. These people shape our character, our values, and even our faith. Proverbs speaks to this with an urgency, making it clear that the people we choose to walk with can lead us either toward life or toward destruction. Let's look at Proverbs 13:20, which says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." Picture Solomon, surrounded by advisors, military leaders, servants, and foreign envoys. As king, he knew the power of influence more than most. He had to discern which people strengthened his reign and which would bring him harm. In those early years, he sought out wise counsel, surrounding himself with people who reinforced his desire to honor God. But over time, Solomon's relationships would change. In his later years, Solomon drifted. He surrounded himself with people who led him to compromise his faith. His numerous alliances, political marriages, and advisors from foreign lands brought influences that lured his heart away from God. This very man, who once valued wisdom above all else, who began with a pure desire to follow God, gradually allowed his relationships to steer him in a direction that ultimately led to spiritual decay. Solomon's life is a profound lesson. Wisdom in relationships isn't a one-time choice. It's an ongoing commitment. And Proverbs, written from the depths of Solomon's experience, warns us of this truth. Imagine yourself in Solomon's shoes, facing the allure of relationships that promise power, status, or satisfaction. Proverbs doesn't just ask us to avoid the influence of fools. It challenges us to see relationships as sacred. Who we walk with isn't about mere proximity. It's about choosing people who will encourage us to grow, who push us toward truth, and who will walk with us through life's challenges while helping us remain grounded in faith. Proverbs 22:24-25 goes even further, cautioning, "Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared." This isn't just practical advice. It's a reminder that emotional and spiritual states are contagious. Proverbs warns that even a subtle influence can shape who we become. The anger, pride, or recklessness of those around us can slowly seep into our own hearts if we aren't careful. The Book of Sirach, another ancient wisdom text not found in the traditional canon, but preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, echoes this sentiment with urgency. Faithful friends are a sturdy shelter. Whoever finds one has found a treasure. Sirach 6:14. Proverbs and Sirach both emphasize that the right friends are a shelter in a storm, a source of wisdom and comfort that strengthens us against the temptations and struggles we face. Sirach reminds us that friends aren't just companions. They're our shelter, a place of spiritual refuge in a chaotic world. The people we choose to let into our inner circle influence our thoughts, our habits, and even our future. We live in a world where relationships are often treated as disposable, where people come and go, and where the meaning of friendship has often been reduced to a connection on social media. Proverbs calls us to something deeper. It tells us to seek out relationships with intention, to prioritize friendships that lift us up, and to be mindful of those who bring us down. Have you ever found yourself becoming more critical, more anxious, or more restless after spending time with certain people? Proverbs calls us to guard against this, to be vigilant about the people we let close, because their influence has a profound impact on the direction of our lives. Proverbs 27:17 famously states, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Think about what this means. To sharpen iron, friction is required. Sparks fly as two blades come into contact. A true friend, someone worth keeping close, isn't necessarily someone who always agrees with us. A godly friend is someone willing to challenge us, to call out our blind spots, to tell us the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Real friendships, the kind Proverbs speaks of, aren't about flattery or convenience. They're about refining each other for God's purposes. Picture a scene from Solomon's own life. Imagine him as a young king receiving advice from trusted friends who encouraged him to follow God, to seek wisdom, to remain humble. Those relationships early on would have been sources of strength, shaping his decisions and grounding him in truth. But imagine later, as he grew more isolated, surrounded by those who valued political gain over spiritual integrity. He lost his way, and Proverbs reflects the regret of a man who knew the cost of walking with the wrong people. Who are you walking with? Who is sharpening you, challenging you, encouraging you to be the person God is calling you to be? Are there people in your life who may be leading you off course, who distract you from God's truth or bring out qualities that don't honor Him? Proverbs urges us to take these questions seriously, to look at our relationships with spiritual clarity, and make decisions based on God's wisdom rather than convenience or comfort. Building relationships with the wise doesn't just happen. It takes effort, discernment, and sometimes the courage to let go of people who don't have our best interests at heart. Proverbs reminds us that friendship is more than a social connection. It's a profound spiritual partnership. When we surround ourselves with people who are committed to God's truth, we're better able to withstand life's storms, to grow in wisdom, and to live out the purpose God has placed on our lives. In Proverbs, the power of words is presented with a weight unlike anything we might expect from a simple collection of sayings. It's clear that in God's eyes, words are not trivial or inconsequential. They are powerful, like seeds that can grow into life or spread destruction. Proverbs 18:21 tells us, "The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit." Solomon, the king known for his wisdom, understood that words could build up a kingdom or tear it down. In his role as a leader, a single decree could bring peace, while a careless word could spark war. His own life bore witness to this truth, as his words brought justice and wisdom in his early years, but became mixed with compromise and carelessness later on. This truth in Proverbs isn't just for leaders, it's for every one of us. Every word we speak has the power to heal, to encourage, to bring joy, or to wound, to deceive, and to destroy. Think of a time in your own life when words deeply impacted you. Maybe it was an encouraging word that lifted your spirit, or a harsh remark that left a scar. Proverbs doesn't hold back in showing us that words are never just words. They can create ripples that spread through our own lives and the lives of others, reaching far beyond the moment they're spoken. Proverbs 12:18 says, "The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." Imagine a sword, a weapon designed to wound, to harm. Proverbs compares reckless words to that weapon, highlighting how easily we can hurt others without even realizing it. Solomon, through his own journey, likely saw how his words impacted the lives of his people, his family, and his kingdom. What's powerful here is the contrast Proverbs gives us: the reckless words that pierce like swords versus the wise words that bring healing. Words, when spoken with wisdom, have the ability to mend what's broken, to soothe the wounds left by the life. We all know the feeling of being uplifted by an encouraging word, the way a kind comment can turn a bad day around or give us hope when we're struggling. Proverbs reminds us that each of us has this power within us, to either heal or hurt, to build up or tear down. Proverbs doesn't shy away from the potential harm of words. Proverbs 15:1 offers this insight. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Solomon understood that our responses have a profound influence on the outcome of a situation. Think of how many conflicts, arguments, or misunderstandings could be diffused with a simple, gentle response. The Proverbs invite us to approach our conversations with humility, to seek to understand before seeking to be understood. Just like honey in the ancient world, words that are gracious, kind, and thoughtful carry a rare sweetness in today's bitter and noisy world. They nourish not only the listener, but also the one who speaks them. Proverbs paints words as agents of healing tools that can mend a broken heart, calm an anxious spirit, or even restore a strained relationship. This isn't poetic exaggeration. It's divine wisdom reminding us that our mouths can either bring life or slowly erode the souls around us. But the weight of this truth is sobering. Because if gracious words bring healing, then careless words can bring harm. Proverbs 12:18 warns, "The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." Every time we speak, we are wielding a weapon or extending a balm. Words can start wars, end friendships, crush dreams, or breathe life back into weary hearts. This is why Proverbs keeps circling back to the discipline of the tongue. In fact, one of the core themes in the book is that wisdom isn't proven by how much we speak, but by how carefully we choose our words. Proverbs 17:27 says, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered." Notice how restraint is elevated, not silence, but thoughtful control, in a culture obsessed with saying everything that comes to mind. Wisdom whispers, "Not every thought needs to be spoken. Not every truth needs to be delivered like a hammer." Even correction, when clothed in grace, can build rather than break. This brings us to a heart-level challenge. What kind of words flow from your mouth? Are they quick and sharp, or slow and seasoned with grace? Do they reflect a heart anchored in God's truth, or a heart tossed about by frustration, fear, or pride? The book of Proverbs invites us to do more than monitor our language. It invites us to examine the source, our hearts. Jesus echoed this when he said, Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. If our words are bitter, it reveals a bitter spring beneath. But if they're gracious, healing, and wise, it shows that our hearts are being shaped by the Spirit of God. So let's take Proverbs seriously. Let's not just read it like a collection of ancient quotes, but as a divine invitation to live and speak with intention. Because the words we use each day are building something. The question is, are they building people up or tearing them down? Are they drawing us closer to God's heart or drifting us further away? Wisdom begins not just with silence, but with surrendering even our words to the one who spoke creation into being. And when we do, our words become instruments of light in a dark world, echoes of heaven's kindness in a world desperate for healing. So, let your tongue be guided by truth. Let your words be like honey sweet, healing, and full of grace. Because when you speak with wisdom, you don't just bless others. You align yourself with the very heart of God. Proverbs compares wise words to honeycomb, reminding us that words can be both sweet and restorative, bringing healing to the deepest parts of our being. How often do we consider our words as something that could bring healing? Our world often encourages us to speak without restraint, to say what's on our mind without considering the impact. But Proverbs offers a different way. It challenges us to treat each word with intention, to see our speech as a tool for God's purposes. Are you speaking words that bring life? Or do your words often drift toward criticism, anger, or impatience? Proverbs doesn't ask us to be perfect, but it does call us to a higher standard, urging us to make our words a reflection of God's wisdom, love, and patience. Imagine if we approached every conversation with the awareness that our words have the power to build up or break down. How different would our relationships be, our communities, our own hearts? Proverbs invites us to see the gift God has given us in our ability to speak, to use it for good, and to let our words be channels of His love. In the book of Proverbs, work and wealth aren't treated as mere means to an end. Instead, they're seen as opportunities to reflect God's character, to show faithfulness in the smallest details, and to honor Him in how we handle both our efforts and our resources. Proverbs 10:4 states, "Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth." This isn't just advice about making a living. It's a call to approach our work with intention, viewing our efforts as part of a bigger picture, a picture that includes our relationship with God and our witness to the world around us. King Solomon. As a ruler with access to unimaginable wealth, understood the delicate balance between prosperity and responsibility. He knew that riches could bless a kingdom when used wisely or bring ruin if sought selfishly. In Proverbs, Solomon's teachings reflect this tension, warning against laziness and greed while promoting diligence and contentment. One vivid illustration Solomon uses to teach about diligence comes from Proverbs 6:6-8. "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler. Yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest." Imagine that. Solomon, one of the wealthiest men in history, pointing to a tiny ant to demonstrate a powerful principle of wisdom. The ant, though small, embodies the virtues of self-discipline, preparation, and foresight. It doesn't work only when watched, nor does it labor for immediate gratification. Instead, the ant diligently stores and gathers, working toward a future need with steady, quiet effort. Proverbs challenges us to consider our own approach to work and finances in the same way. Do we work only for short-term gains, for what will satisfy our desires now? Or are we like the ant, diligent and disciplined, working with integrity even when no one is watching? Solomon understood that work done faithfully, no matter how mundane, reflects a heart that honors God. In Proverbs 22:7, Solomon issues a sober warning. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. This verse is more than a caution against debt. It's a reminder that money can become a trap if not handled with care. Proverbs doesn't condemn wealth itself, but warns that without wisdom it can easily lead to bondage. A life built on borrowing and spending beyond one's means can quickly spiral into a form of enslavement, a dependency on the lender rather than on God. In today's culture, debt is often marketed as a way to achieve dreams instantly. A new car, a bigger home, a luxurious vacation, all just a loan away. But Proverbs urges us to view wealth differently. Financial freedom, according to Proverbs, isn't about having everything we want. It's about living within our means, about letting our needs drive our spending rather than our desires. It's about experiencing the peace that comes from being free from the chains of debt, knowing we can be generous without worry. The Book of Sirach, also known as Ecclesiasticus, another ancient wisdom text respected in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, mirrors this teaching with a similar warning. Sirach 31:1 says, "Wakefulness over wealth wastes away one's flesh, and anxiety about it drives away sleep." Sirach reinforces Proverbs' message. Chasing wealth without wisdom can drain us, consuming our peace and even our health. Both Proverbs and Sirach emphasize that true prosperity isn't found in endless accumulation, but in contentment, generosity, and a heart free from the bondage of materialism. Proverbs 11:24-25 offers yet another layer to this wisdom, revealing the paradox of generosity. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. This may seem counterintuitive in a world that encourages us to hold tightly to what we have. But Proverbs presents giving as a divine principle. Those who give generously are themselves enriched, not necessarily in material wealth, but in joy, peace, and spiritual blessings that far surpass the value of money. Imagine living this way, not clinging to every dollar, but trusting God's provision, being free to give without hesitation, knowing that God's abundance flows through those who are willing to share. This is the wisdom that Proverbs invites us into, a life of freedom, contentment, and faith. And when it comes to hard work, Proverbs 12:11 reinforces the virtue of honest labor. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense. Solomon understood the lure of get-rich-quick schemes, the idea that shortcuts could lead to instant wealth. But Proverbs warns that integrity in work and consistency in effort yield true, lasting reward, honest labor. Whether in our careers, our homes, or our ministries, bears fruit over time. while shortcuts often lead to disappointment or even ruin. Are you working and managing your finances in a way that honors God's wisdom? Are you diligent in your efforts, mindful of debt, and open-handed in generosity? Proverbs calls us to evaluate our work and resources not as things we own, but as gifts entrusted to us by God. How we handle these gifts reveals our hearts. Imagine starting each day with the intention to work for God, to handle money with His wisdom, to see each task and each paycheck as part of a larger divine purpose. Proverbs doesn't just want us to work and earn. It wants us to live with purpose, diligence, and peace in every area of our lives. If these teachings resonate with you, take a moment to reflect on how you might align your work and finances with God's principles. And if you know someone who might benefit from this wisdom, share this video with them. Here on Deep Bible Stories, we're on a journey to uncover truths that not only impact our spiritual lives, but shape how we live, work, and give. In Proverbs, integrity isn't just a virtue. It's the bedrock of a life that truly honors God. Proverbs teaches that integrity isn't about perfection, but about consistency, honesty, and alignment with God's ways. It's the commitment to do what's right, not just when it's easy or when others are watching, but in every circumstance. Proverbs 10:9 says, "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but he who makes his ways crooked will be found out." Imagine the life of Solomon, a king who was entrusted with both power and wisdom. He knew the temptations that came with wealth and influence, the allure of shortcuts, the appeal of bending truth to gain favor or avoid conflict. Early in his reign, Solomon was celebrated for his wisdom and discernment. He asked God for understanding, not riches or power, and God blessed him abundantly. Yet as time passed, Solomon's integrity would be tested. He would learn, as we all do, that integrity isn't a one-time choice, but a continual commitment, a daily decision to live by the principles that align us with God's truth. Integrity, in the eyes of Proverbs, is more than honesty or moral uprightness. It's about being whole, undivided. To walk in integrity is to live in alignment with God's character, with no hidden agendas, no double-mindedness. It's the quiet strength of knowing that our actions, words, and thoughts are all guided by a commitment to truth, justice, and compassion. Proverbs 11:3 adds to this by saying, "The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity." In a world where deception, manipulation, and moral compromises are often rewarded, Proverbs calls us to a higher standard. It tells us that integrity acts like a compass, guiding us through the challenges, the temptations, and the uncertainties of life. When we walk in integrity, we're not swayed by the latest trend or temptation. Instead, we're grounded. Our path is clear, and our conscience is at peace. The book of Sirach offers a similar perspective, emphasizing the value of integrity and the blessings of a righteous heart. Sirach 4:10 warns, "Do not let your integrity or loyalty be compromised, even if it seems to bring suffering." Like Proverbs, Sirach reminds us that integrity sometimes comes at a cost. Standing firm in truth might not always bring immediate rewards. In fact, it might bring criticism, misunderstanding, or even hardship. But Proverbs assures us that this cost is worth it. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely. There's a security, a peace that comes from knowing we are in alignment with God, that our lives are a reflection of His character, even when the world doesn't understand or agree. Imagine yourself in a difficult situation where the truth is hard to tell, where honesty could cost you something precious, a relationship, a job opportunity, or the approval of those you respect. Proverbs speaks to that moment, urging us to choose the path of integrity over convenience, to trust that God honors those who honor Him, even when it seems costly. Proverbs 27 says, "The righteous who walks in his integrity, blessed are his children after him." This verse touches on something profound, the legacy of integrity. Integrity doesn't just affect our lives, it shapes the lives of those who come after us. Children, friends, family members, all are impacted by the example we set. When we walk in integrity, we're creating a legacy that blesses others, a path they can follow with confidence. Imagine the blessing of passing down not just material wealth, but a legacy of character, a reputation for honesty, a name associated with kindness and faithfulness. Proverbs also makes it clear that integrity isn't just a safeguard for ourselves. It's a light that shines in the darkness of a broken world. Proverbs 4:18 beautifully captures this. The path of the righteous is like the morning sun, shining ever brighter till the full light of day. When we live with integrity, our lives are a beacon of hope, a testimony that it is possible to walk uprightly in a world filled with corruption and deceit. People around us see this light. They're drawn to it, inspired by it, and sometimes even changed by it. In today's culture, integrity can feel like a lonely road. We're often pressured to bend the truth, to take shortcuts, to follow the crowd, even when it goes against our convictions. But Proverbs calls us to something greater. It promises that those who walk in integrity walk with a confidence that no worldly approval can offer. They walk with the assurance that their steps are ordered by God, that He sees their faithfulness, and that He rewards those who honor His truth. Let's think for a moment about what it would look like to live with this kind of integrity in every area of our lives. Imagine relationships built on honesty, workplaces where people respect one another's word, communities that value truth over convenience. Integrity is more than a personal virtue. It's a transformative force, one that has the power to reshape our families, our communities, and even our world. Proverbs 28:6 reinforces this by saying, "Better is a poor man who walks in his integrity than a rich man who is crooked in his ways." This verse speaks directly to a timeless temptation, the desire to compromise for the sake of gain, to sacrifice character in pursuit of wealth, success, or status. Proverbs teaches us that true wealth isn't measured by our bank accounts or social status, but by the depth of our character. A life lived in integrity is one of the greatest treasures we can possess. And it's a treasure that doesn't fade or lose its value. Are you walking in integrity? Are there areas in your life where compromise has crept in, where convenience has taken the place of conviction? Proverbs challenges us to examine our hearts, to align every part of our lives with God's truth, and to let His wisdom guide each step. The book of Proverbs often points to a paradox that feels almost countercultural. True greatness is found in humility, over and over. Proverbs warns that while the world exalts pride and self-confidence, it is humility that brings us closer to God. Proverbs 16:18 famously states, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." This isn't just a moral lesson, it's a spiritual law woven into the fabric of life, warning us that pride isn't just a character flaw, it's a force that leads to downfall. King Solomon, despite all his wisdom, was not immune to the dangers of pride. He began his reign with a humble request for wisdom, seeking God's guidance above all else. But as his fame, wealth, and power grew, Solomon's humility began to erode. His story serves as a powerful reminder that pride often starts small, creeping into our hearts almost unnoticed. It can take the form of self-reliance, the desire to be seen as superior, or the subtle belief that we are above the rules. Imagine Solomon's life. He built a glorious kingdom, amassed wealth that would make him the richest man of his time, and ruled with authority that was unmatched. Yet, his heart gradually shifted. The very king who once declared the fear of the Lord as the beginning of wisdom would later make decisions that led to his kingdom's fragmentation. Solomon's life illustrates that pride is not only dangerous, but deceptive. It can thrive under the surface, wrapped in success, achievement, and even good intentions, until it eventually leads us away from God. Proverbs 11:2 adds, "When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom." To the world, pride can appear strong, confident, even admirable. But in God's eyes, pride is dangerous because it blinds us to our need for Him. Pride creates a barrier between us and the wisdom God offers. Proverbs tells us that humility, on the other hand, opens the door to true understanding. To be humble is to recognize that we don't have all the answers, that our strength is limited, and that our lives are secure only in God's hands. Humility is the foundation of wisdom because it keeps us teachable. Proverbs 3:34 echoes this truth, saying, "He mocks proud mockers, but shows favor to the humble and oppressed." The humble are those who remain open to correction, who are willing to learn and who acknowledge their dependency on God. This is why Proverbs speaks so highly of humility. It brings us into alignment with God's heart, allowing us to see ourselves and the world as He does. In the book of Sirach, humility is praised in a similar way. Sirach 3:18 advises, "The greater you are, the more you must humble yourself, so you will find favor in the sight of the Lord." Sirach, like Proverbs, highlights the irony of humility. The more we achieve, the more we need to remember our dependence on God. This goes against what the world teaches us. We are often told to celebrate our strengths, to stand out, to prove ourselves, while the world teaches us to take pride in our achievements, in our status, and in how we're perceived. The wisdom of Proverbs, and even the book of Sirach, calls us to a different way. It's a path where significance isn't measured by what we accomplish for ourselves, but by how faithfully we serve others. Proverbs 29:23 offers a sobering truth. Pride brings a person low, but the humble in spirit gain honor. It's a quiet but powerful reminder that where we root our identity determines the direction of our lives. Pride seeks value in things that fade: position, reputation, admiration. But humility anchors itself in something eternal: God's delight in those who walk in obedience and reverence. The wisdom literature doesn't just discourage arrogance, it lifts up the beauty of a humble heart, over and over. Proverbs assures us that true honor doesn't come from self-promotion, but from surrender. When we let go of the need to be seen, to be praised, or to be in control, we begin to experience a deeper kind of freedom, a life that finds its value in being known and loved by God, not in trying to impress the world. Nowhere is this better embodied than in the life of Jesus. The New Testament gives us the ultimate example of humility in action. Philippians 2:6-8 describes Jesus, the Son of God, choosing not to cling to his divine privileges. Though he had all authority, he laid it aside to take the form of a servant. He chose obedience, even to the point of death on a cross. Think about that. The one who spoke the universe into existence didn't demand worship, but instead bent low to wash feet, heal the broken, and carry a cross meant for us. His humility wasn't weakness. It was power under perfect control. And through that humility, he achieved the greatest victory of all, conquering sin and death for the sake of love. This is the kind of greatness Proverbs calls us toward, not a greatness built on recognition, but on selflessness. Not a greatness that elevates, but one that descends in service. But Proverbs also issues a warning, because pride isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes, it sneaks in quietly. Proverbs 26:12 asks, "Do you see a person wise in their own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for them." That hits hard, doesn't it? Pride often wears a mask. It may look like confidence or independence. It may sound like, "I've got this," or "I know better." But beneath the surface, it resists correction, shrugs off accountability, and quietly believes it doesn't need God or anyone else. This is why the call to humility isn't just about outward behavior. It's about posture, the posture of our hearts. Do we approach life with teachability, with an openness to learn, to grow, and even to be wrong? Or do we guard our egos and push away anything that challenges us? God doesn't despise the humble. He lifts them up, and he doesn't ignore pride. He resists it. That's why this matters so deeply. Because the humble aren't just nice people, they're the ones positioned to receive God's grace, to walk in his favor, and to reflect the character of Christ to a watching world. So let's pause and reflect. Are we building our lives on pride or humility? Are we pursuing recognition or choosing to serve without applause? Jesus showed us the way, and Proverbs confirms it. The road to honor begins not with climbing, but with kneeling, with laying down our pride and lifting our eyes to the one who honors what the world overlooks. Let's choose the way of humility. It may not be the loudest path, but it is the one most aligned with the heart of God. Proverbs reminds us that the one who is wise in their own eyes shuts themselves off from God's wisdom. It's a dangerous place to be because pride blinds us to our own need for growth. Are there areas in your life where pride has crept in? Are you leaning on your own understanding rather than seeking God's wisdom? Proverbs invites us to lay down our self-sufficiency, to admit our need for God, and to walk humbly with him. When we let go of pride, we're able to experience the fullness of his guidance, his protection, and his love. Imagine what it would look like to live this way, free from the need to prove yourself, willing to take correction, open to learning from others. Humility isn't about thinking less of ourselves. It's about thinking of ourselves less. It's about recognizing that our lives are not our own, that every gift, every talent, and every opportunity is from God, meant to glorify Him and serve others. In the book of Proverbs, one of the most profound themes is the call to trust God fully and abandon self-reliance. In a world where independence and self-sufficiency are celebrated, Proverbs turns this idea on its head, declaring that the path to true peace, guidance, and security isn't found in relying on ourselves, but in surrendering to God. Proverbs 3:5-6 captures this beautifully. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. Imagine the weight of those words. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. This isn't a partial trust or something to lean on only in hard times. It's a call to place every fear, every hope, and every decision in God's hands, to trust Him with every fiber of our being. Solomon, with all his wisdom and understanding, knew the limitations of human knowledge. Despite his unparalleled insights, he saw that even the wisest person falls short of understanding the fullness of God's plan. This is why he implores us to trust not in ourselves, but in God, whose wisdom surpasses all. Self-reliance is an enticing path. It offers control, a sense of security, and the promise that we can determine our own destiny. But Proverbs warns that leaning on our own understanding ultimately leads us into troubled waters. Proverbs 28:26 declares, "Those who trust in themselves are fools, but those who walk in wisdom are kept safe." This isn't an insult. It's a stark reminder that our knowledge, as vast as it may seem, is limited. We can't see the full picture or anticipate the consequences of every decision. To rely solely on ourselves is to build our lives on a foundation that cannot withstand life's storms. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a dense forest, trying to find your way through without a map. You might navigate some parts on your own, but eventually you'll reach places where your own sense of direction isn't enough. Proverbs tells us that God is that map, that guide who knows every twist and turn ahead. When we acknowledge Him surrendering our plans and our paths, He directs us, not just randomly, but with purpose and precision. Proverbs 16:9 says, "In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." This verse captures the mystery and beauty of God's guidance. We can make plans, set goals, and work toward them, but it is ultimately God who shapes our journey. Solomon reminds us that while we can dream and plan, there is a divine wisdom that surpasses our own, leading us even when we cannot see the way. But trusting God isn't passive. It requires an active surrender, a choice to lay down our pride and open our hearts to His direction. Proverbs 19:21 echoes this with remarkable clarity. "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." This isn't just about letting go of control. It's about embracing God's purpose over our own desires. We might have dreams or ideas that seem right to us, but God's wisdom sees beyond the present moment. He guides us not just toward what we want, but toward what will truly fulfill and transform us. The Book of Job, another wisdom text, offers a perspective that resonates with Proverbs' call to trust. In Job 12:13 it says, "To God belong wisdom and power. Counsel and understanding are His." Job's story is one of intense suffering and loss. Yet throughout his journey, he learns to surrender his understanding and place his trust in God's ultimate wisdom. Like Proverbs, Job reveals that trusting God doesn't mean understanding every detail. It means believing that God's wisdom and power are sufficient to carry us through every trial. When we surrender to God, Proverbs tells us we experience a peace that self-reliance can never offer. Proverbs 3:24 says, "When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet." This verse isn't just about physical rest. It's about a deep inner peace, a freedom from the anxieties that come from trying to control everything ourselves. Trusting God brings rest to our souls, a sweet peace that soothes even in life's uncertainties. Are you truly trusting God with all your heart? Or are there areas where you're leaning on your own understanding? Proverbs invites us to examine our lives and to bring every decision, every plan under God's wisdom. It's a call to abandon the illusion of control and to embrace a life guided by faith rather than fear. Imagine the freedom that comes from trusting God completely. Think of how many of life's worries would fade if we truly believed that God is directing our steps, that His plans are better than ours, and that He knows what we need even more than we do. Proverbs promises that when we place our trust in Him, He makes our path straight. This doesn't mean our lives will be without challenges, but it means that every challenge, every trial has purpose and direction. Proverbs 3:7-8 offers a final encouragement on this path of trust. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Trusting God isn't just a spiritual act. It impacts every part of our lives. When we release the burdens of self-reliance, we experience a lightness, a renewal that strengthens us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. It's a healing that flows from knowing we are in the hands of a God who loves us deeply and who works all things together for our good. The book of Proverbs doesn't shy away from the complexities of human emotion. Anger, in particular, is addressed repeatedly as both a powerful force and a potential stumbling block on the path to wisdom. Proverbs 16:32 says, "Better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city." Imagine that. Solomon, the great king, valued who could control their anger and emotions over a mighty warrior. Why? Because conquering one's own heart is far more difficult and, in the eyes of God, far more honorable than conquering anything in the external world. Anger is a natural human response, often sparked by frustration, betrayal, or injustice. But Proverbs reminds us that, left unchecked, anger can lead to impulsive actions, harsh words, and broken relationships. Proverbs 29:11 warns, "Fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end." This verse shows the distinction between wisdom and folly. A wise person doesn't let anger control them, they control it. While the world may see venting anger as a show of strength or a way to assert one's dominance, Proverbs sees it as foolishness, a sign that one is ruled by emotion rather than by wisdom. Consider Solomon's perspective as a leader who would have dealt with conflicts, betrayals, and challenges constantly. He knew the cost of letting anger take control. For a king, anger could lead to impulsive decisions that might harm not only individuals but entire nations. For us, anger might not impact a kingdom, but it has the power to affect our families, our friendships, and our own spiritual health. Proverbs urges us to be careful with this powerful emotion, to recognize it for what it is, and to respond to it with self-control and wisdom. But self-control is not something we master overnight. It requires intentionality, humility, and dependence on God. Proverbs 19:11 says, "A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense." This verse challenges us to see beyond our immediate reaction, to look deeper and find patience in moments that might otherwise provoke us. Proverbs teaches that our ability to control our temper is not a weakness, but a strength, an honor that comes from understanding the power of grace. Self-control, as Proverbs describes it, is a reflection of God's own character. Think of how many times throughout the Bible God displays patience with humanity, showing mercy where judgment was deserved. Just as God is slow to anger and rich in mercy, He calls us to reflect this patience in our relationships. Proverbs teaches that when we practice self-control, we're not just managing an emotion, we're participating in God's nature, choosing love over wrath, understanding over reaction. Yet Proverbs is clear that anger isn't inherently wrong. Proverbs 14:29 offers this insight. Whoever is patient has great understanding, but one who is quick-tempered displays folly. The issue isn't anger itself, but how we handle it. Righteous anger, a deep indignation toward injustice, cruelty, or oppression, can reflect God's heart. But even righteous anger requires self-control. We are called to respond thoughtfully, channeling our energy toward positive action rather than letting anger fester or lead us into sin. The book of Sirach speaks similarly about self-control, calling it the key to a peaceful and wise life. Sirach 28:2-3 warns, "Forgive your neighbor the wrong he has done, and then your sins will be pardoned when you pray. Does a man harbor anger against another and yet seek for healing from the Lord?" Sirach, like Proverbs, challenges us to let go of anger, especially when it hinders our relationship with God. In both texts, there's a clear message. Forgiveness and self-control aren't just good practices. They're essential to a life of wisdom and peace. In today's world, the idea of self-control over anger feels almost countercultural. We live in an age where speaking your mind and getting even are often praised, where anger is sometimes seen as a badge of honor, a way to assert oneself. But Proverbs tells us that real strength isn't in unleashing our anger, but in holding it back. Proverbs 15:18 advises, "A hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms a quarrel." This isn't just practical advice, it's a spiritual principle. Choosing patience over anger not only preserves peace, it reflects the heart of God. Imagine the freedom that would come from mastering this principle. How many arguments could be avoided? How many relationships could be healed? Proverbs teaches that in moments of anger, we have a choice to escalate or to calm, to react or to respond. Every time we choose self-control, we bring a little more of God's peace into our own hearts and into the lives of those around us. How do you respond to anger? Do you allow it to take control? Or do you seek God's help in responding with patience? Proverbs invites us to examine our hearts, to recognize where anger has taken root, and to bring it under God's guidance. Anger doesn't have to lead to destruction. It can lead us closer to God if we are willing to surrender it to Him. One of the most powerful verses on self-control comes from Proverbs 25:28. Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. In ancient times, A city without walls was vulnerable, exposed to attacks, and unable to defend itself. Proverbs uses this image to show that a lack of self-control leaves us equally defenseless. Without self-control, our emotions, especially anger, can lead us into actions and words we later regret, leaving us spiritually exposed and vulnerable. Proverbs encourages us to build up the walls of self-control around our hearts, to be vigilant and intentional, protecting our spirit from the destruction that unchecked anger can bring. When we exercise self-control, we're not denying our emotions. We're directing them, using them in ways that align with God's purpose. Imagine how different life could look if we embraced Proverbs' wisdom on anger and self-control. Picture a world where patience and understanding are stronger than retaliation, where grace is extended before judgment, and where people seek God's peace rather than venting every frustration. This is the life Proverbs calls us to. A life where we reflect God's character in every reaction, every conversation, and every relationship. In the book of Proverbs, discipline isn't viewed as punishment or mere restriction. It's a pathway to growth, wisdom, and ultimately to a life that honors God. Discipline is described as a treasure that shapes our character, sharpens our focus, and refines our hearts. Proverbs 12:1 sets the tone by stating, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid." This is a stark reminder that wisdom and discipline go hand in hand. In God's eyes, discipline isn't harsh or limiting. It's a gift, a way of aligning our lives with His purpose. Solomon, with all his insight, knew that a life without discipline is a life that drifts. Proverbs 25:28 says, "Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control." Imagine a city with no walls, exposed to every threat, every danger. Proverbs uses this powerful image to convey that without discipline, we leave ourselves vulnerable, not just to external challenges, but to the impulses, desires, and distractions that can pull us away from God's path. Discipline, like walls around a city, protects us, giving structure and security to our lives. Proverbs teaches that discipline isn't just for times of correction. It's a lifestyle, a commitment to live purposefully. Proverbs 6:6-8 offers us the example of the ant. "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest." This isn't just about hard work. It's about self-motivation, the ability to act with foresight and diligence without constant supervision. Proverbs encourages us to adopt the ant's disciplined way of life, to prepare, to persevere, and to keep moving forward even when no one is watching. At its core, Proverbs teaches that discipline is an act of humility. It's the willingness to be corrected, to learn from our mistakes, and to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers. Proverbs 3:11-12 says, "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent His rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those He loves, as a father the son He delights in." Discipline, in this sense, is not only valuable, but a sign of God's love. When God corrects us, He's not punishing us. He's guiding us, helping us avoid paths that lead to destruction and nudging us back toward life. This concept of loving correction and discipline can feel foreign in a world that values independence and freedom from accountability. But Proverbs challenges this view, showing us that discipline isn't about control, it's about freedom. Proverbs 13:18 warns, "Whoever disregards discipline comes to poverty and shame, but whoever heeds correction is honored." In God's kingdom, discipline is the key to honor and prosperity, a way of building a life that withstands both challenges and temptations. The person who embraces discipline isn't restricted. They're empowered to live with intention, focus, and resilience. The book of Sirach also speaks to the value of discipline, particularly in character development. Sirach 18:14-15 says, "God's mercy is shown to those who accept discipline and who are eager to obey his judgments," just like Proverbs. Sirach emphasizes that God's correction is a gift. Accepting discipline is a way of embracing God's mercy, acknowledging that he knows what's best for us, even when it's uncomfortable or challenging. Proverbs also reminds us that discipline isn't just about what we avoid, but what we pursue. Proverbs 10:17 says, "Whoever heeds discipline shows the way to life, but whoever ignores correction leads others astray." When we live disciplined lives, we're setting an example, a light for others to follow. Think about the impact of a disciplined life in your family, workplace, or community. Discipline isn't just personal, it's communal. By embracing it, we're creating a ripple effect, inspiring those around us to seek God's wisdom, to value correction, and to pursue integrity. In our culture, discipline is often associated with self-denial or hardship, but Proverbs offers a different perspective. Discipline is a way to joy, a path that leads to rewards. Proverbs 15:32-33 declares, "Those who disregard discipline despise themselves, but the one who heeds correction gains understanding." Wisdom's instruction is to fear the Lord, and humility comes before honor. Discipline leads us to wisdom and honor, aligning us with God's purposes and bringing blessings into our lives. It's not about restriction. It's about shaping our lives according to God's design so that we can experience true fulfillment. Imagine a life where every decision is guided by God's wisdom, where every choice reflects His truth. Proverbs teaches that discipline helps us achieve this life, not by controlling every detail, but by giving us the tools to choose wisely. Through discipline, we learn patience, self-control, and resilience, qualities that are invaluable in our walk with God. Discipline allows us to grow spiritually, transforming us from the inside out. How do you view discipline? Is it something you avoid, something you see as a burden, or can you see it as a gift from God, a way to grow closer to Him? Proverbs invites us to reframe our understanding of discipline, to see it as a pathway to wisdom, honor, and ultimately to a deeper relationship with our Creator. The book of Proverbs speaks powerfully about the family as a foundational unit, a place where love, wisdom, and character are cultivated and passed down from one generation to the next. Proverbs is filled with advice, not only for parents, but for children, urging both to honor each other and to embrace the wisdom of God within their homes. In Proverbs, parenting is seen as one of the highest callings, a sacred duty to guide and shape young lives according to God's principles. One of the most well-known verses in Proverbs is Proverbs 22:6, which says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. This isn't just a proverb, it's a promise. Proverbs acknowledges that the foundation we build in our children's lives will shape their paths, influencing the choices they make long after they leave our homes. But what does it mean to train up a child? It's more than just teaching right from wrong. It's about guiding children to know God personally, instilling a deep love and respect for His Word, and modeling a life that seeks His wisdom daily. Imagine Solomon, the author of many Proverbs, passing down this wisdom to his own children, sharing the insights he learned through both success and failure. He knew that wisdom doesn't come from mere instruction, but from example. Proverbs reminds us that as parents, our lives speak as loudly as our words. Children learn not only from what we say, but from what we do, from the way we handle conflict, treat others, and live out our faith. Proverbs emphasizes that discipline is a vital part of parenting. Proverbs 13:24 tells us, "Whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them." In the context of Proverbs, the rod represents guidance and correction, not punishment for punishment's sake. The goal is to lead children away from harmful behaviors and toward righteousness. Discipline in Proverbs is a form of love, a way to teach children the difference between wisdom and folly, right and wrong. It's a tool to help them grow in character and to protect them from paths that lead to destruction. Yet, discipline in Proverbs is always balanced with love and patience. Proverbs 15:1 teaches, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." Parenting is a call to embody both firmness and gentleness, to correct with compassion and to teach with patience. Proverbs urges parents to avoid harshness, knowing that anger or criticism can wound a child's spirit. Instead, parents are encouraged to model patience and understanding, to create an environment where children feel secure in both love and guidance. The book of Sirach offers a similar view, highlighting the responsibility parents have in shaping their children's lives. Sirach 31:2 says, "Whoever loves their son will discipline him often, so that he may rejoice in him in the end." This echoes Proverbs' teaching, emphasizing that discipline is an act of love, not control. Just as Proverbs warns against harshness, Sirach reminds us that true discipline is rooted in love and directed toward a child's future joy and fulfillment. Both texts remind us that parenting is a balance of instruction and encouragement, correction and affirmation. In Proverbs, children are called to honor their parents, recognizing the wisdom and experience they offer. Proverbs 1:8-9 says, "Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They are a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck." Here Proverbs speaks to the beauty of a parent's guidance, portraying it as a crown, a blessing, and a source of honor. When children respect and embrace the wisdom of their parents, they carry a legacy of strength and character that blesses them throughout life. But Proverbs also places a great responsibility on parents to be worthy of that honor. Proverbs 14:26 teaches, "Whoever fears the Lord has a secure fortress, and for their children it will be a refuge." This verse reveals that a parent's faith becomes a spiritual shelter for their children. When parents walk closely with God, seeking His wisdom and living with integrity, they create a spiritual covering over their family, a place of safety where children feel protected, loved, and valued. Parents are called to be that refuge, that safe place where children can grow up anchored in God's love. In today's fast-paced culture, Proverbs' wisdom on family and parenting is more relevant than ever. We live in a world where values and beliefs are often challenged, where children are exposed to conflicting messages from every direction. Proverbs urges us to create homes that are grounded in God's truth, where His word is the foundation and His wisdom guides every decision. It calls parents to prioritize teaching God's ways, even when the world tells us other things are more important. Let's pause and reflect. Are we creating a home where God's wisdom is cherished and taught? Are we modeling patience, integrity, and love in a way that honors God? Proverbs invites us to see our families as the first place where faith is lived out, a place where God's truth is not only taught, but embodied. Proverbs 27 highlights the impact of this kind of faith. This verse speaks to the power of a life lived in righteousness and how it blesses future generations. When parents choose to live in alignment with God's ways, their children reap the benefits. Growing up with a model of integrity, love, and faithfulness. It's a legacy that goes beyond material wealth, creating a spiritual inheritance that shapes their lives for years to come. Imagine what it would look like if every family embraced this wisdom, if homes were places where God's love was taught, where discipline was balanced with compassion, and where children felt valued and protected. Proverbs tells us that this kind of family environment doesn't just benefit the individual household. It impacts communities, generations, and ultimately, the world. In Proverbs, Solomon doesn't shy away from addressing one of the most challenging aspects of human life: sexual purity and the lure of temptation. Proverbs speaks directly to the heart of these issues, urging readers to be vigilant, to exercise self-control, and to remember that our bodies and hearts are sacred, meant to honor God. Proverbs 5:3-5 warns, "For the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil, but in the end she is bitter as gall, sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave." Imagine Solomon's perspective as he wrote these words. A king surrounded by power, wealth, and temptation. He would have known firsthand the dangers of allowing desire to cloud judgment. In Proverbs, Solomon likens temptation to a path that seems inviting, but ultimately leads to ruin. The sweetness of forbidden attraction is momentary, but its consequences can last a lifetime, leading not only to personal heartache, but to broken relationships, damaged reputations, and even spiritual isolation. Proverbs urges us to look beyond the allure of temptation and see it for what it truly is: a trap that harms not only us, but those we love. Proverbs 6:27-29 uses powerful imagery to convey this. Can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? Can a man walk on hot coals without his feet being scorched? So is he who sleeps with another man's wife. No one who touches her will go unpunished. This vivid imagery serves as a reminder that indulging in sexual sin carries consequences, both visible and unseen. Just as fire leaves burns, succumbing to temptation scars the heart and soul. Proverbs doesn't only address the dangers of temptation, it offers practical wisdom for resisting it. Proverbs 4:23 instructs, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." This verse holds a powerful truth. The battle for purity begins in the heart. The mind and soul are gateways to our actions. And Proverbs teaches that by guarding what we allow into our hearts, our thoughts, desires, and intentions, we can avoid falling into the snares of temptation. Proverbs calls us to a vigilant life, one where we actively protect our hearts from influences that lead us away from God's will. Solomon, aware of the weakness of human nature, urges his readers to exercise wisdom and discernment in their relationships. Proverbs 7 tells the story of a young man led astray by temptation, following the path of a seductress who promises pleasure but ultimately leads him toward destruction. Proverbs 7:22-23 describes it vividly. All at once he followed her like an ox going to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into a noose till an arrow pierces his liver, like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing it will cost him his life. This warning isn't just about physical relationships. It's a cautionary tale about the power of unchecked desire and the need for boundaries. The book of Sirach echoes Proverbs' warnings on temptation and purity. Sirach 9:3-4 advises, "Do not gaze at a virgin, lest you be ensnared by her beauty. Do not give your soul to prostitutes, lest you destroy your inheritance." Both Sirach and Proverbs address the need to guard our senses, to avoid situations that would lead us down a path of compromise, in Sirach, as in Proverbs. Wisdom is about setting boundaries, not out of restriction, but out of protection, a way of preserving our integrity and honoring God. In today's culture, the teachings of Proverbs on sexual purity and temptation are more relevant than ever. We live in an age where boundaries are often disregarded, where purity is seen as old-fashioned, and where temptation is present at every turn, from social media to entertainment. Proverbs calls us to live differently, to value purity and to seek God's wisdom in a world that often glorifies the opposite. But why does Proverbs place such emphasis on purity? Because purity isn't just about refraining from certain actions. It's about honoring God with our whole being. Proverbs 16:2 tells us, "All a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the Lord." God doesn't just see our actions. He sees our intentions, our hidden thoughts, and our deepest desires. Purity is about aligning these inner aspects of ourselves with God's holiness, seeking to honor Him in thought, word, and deed. Imagine the freedom that comes from living a life of integrity and purity, a life unburdened by guilt, unclouded by secrets, and fully dedicated to God. Proverbs 10:9 promises, "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out." This verse assures us that a life lived in purity and integrity brings peace and security. It's a life that doesn't have to hide, that doesn't live in fear of being found out, but that rests in the assurance of God's approval. Proverbs 5:18-19 also offers a positive vision of love and commitment, encouraging us to honor and cherish our marriages. "May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. May you ever be intoxicated with her love." Proverbs teaches that God's design for love and intimacy is beautiful when experienced within the boundaries He has set. Rather than seeing purity as a restriction, Proverbs celebrates it as a way to experience deeper joy, trust, and connection within the bonds of marriage. How are you guarding your heart against temptation? Are you actively seeking God's wisdom in your relationships and decisions? Or are there areas where compromise has crept in? Proverbs invites us to examine our hearts. to recognize where we need to set boundaries, and to seek purity as a path to deeper connection with God. In the book of Proverbs, the consequences of sin are painted in stark, unforgettable imagery. Sin isn't merely a mistake or a poor decision. It's a path that leads to darkness, suffering, and ultimately, destruction. Proverbs warns us that when we choose to walk in sin, we're not just making life difficult for ourselves, we're stepping into a dangerous spiritual reality that distances us from God's protection, peace, and guidance. Proverbs 5:22-23 captures this with powerful words. The evil deeds of the wicked ensnare them. The cords of their sins hold them fast. For lack of discipline they will die, led astray by their own great folly. Here, Proverbs uses the imagery of sin as a snare, a trap that entangles those who fall into it, holding them tightly and leading them to spiritual and even physical ruin. This verse serves as a solemn reminder that sin doesn't just happen to us. Rather, it's a result of choices, often small ones, that pull us further away from God and lead us into bondage. Consider the world we live in today. Society often downplays the seriousness of sin, treating it as a trivial mistake or something that's easy to brush off. But Proverbs teaches us that sin has a lasting impact. Proverbs 10:16 says, "The wages of the righteous bring them life, but the income of the wicked brings them punishment." This verse reflects a spiritual truth that reverberates throughout the Bible. Every action, every decision has consequences. For the righteous, a life lived in alignment with God's will leads to peace and fulfillment. For those who choose sin, the consequences are emptiness, suffering, and judgment. One of the most poignant passages in Proverbs comes from Proverbs 129-31, which speaks of those who ignore wisdom, since they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord. They will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the fruit of their schemes. In other words, sin bears fruit, a bitter harvest that we inevitably have to reap. This image reminds us that sin is not without cost. When we choose our own way over God's, we are planting seeds that will grow into a harvest of regret, pain, and loss. Proverbs doesn't just warn about the general effects of sin. It also dives into specific actions and their consequences. Proverbs 6:27-28 speaks directly to those who fall into lust and sexual sin. Can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? Can a man walk on hot coals without his feet being scorched? The answer is clear. No one can escape the consequences of sin. Just as fire burns and coals scorch, so sin leaves its mark. This warning isn't meant to shame us, but to open our eyes to the reality that God's commandments are there to protect us, not to restrict us. The book of Sirach also speaks powerfully about sin's consequences, echoing Proverbs' warnings. Sirach 21:2 says, "Flee from sin as from a snake, for if you approach sin, it will bite you. Its teeth are lion's teeth and can destroy human lives." Like Proverbs, Sirach doesn't sugarcoat the truth. Sin has a vicious bite, and approaching it carelessly will lead to destruction. Both texts remind us that sin is not something to be flirted with or taken lightly. It's a force that, when unchecked, seeks to devour and destroy. Yet Proverbs doesn't leave us without hope. It teaches us that while sin has consequences, redemption is always within reach for those who turn to God. Proverbs 28:13 offers a promise of hope and forgiveness. Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. This verse shows that while sin entraps us, confession and repentance free us. God is merciful, willing to forgive those who acknowledge their wrongs and seek His grace. Proverbs urges us to be honest about our sins, to confess and turn away from them, knowing that in God's mercy there is freedom. Imagine the relief and peace that come from confessing, from laying down the weight of hidden sins. Proverbs 14-12 warns, "There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death." This isn't just a warning about moral failure. It's an invitation to examine the paths we're walking. Are we following our own understanding, or are we seeking God's wisdom to guide us? Proverbs teaches that without God's wisdom, we may think we're on the right path, but it leads to spiritual death. Proverbs calls us to a life of integrity, one that resists sin and its consequences by seeking God's truth. Proverbs 16-6 says, "Through love and faithfulness, sin is atoned for. Through the fear of the Lord, evil is avoided." This verse provides a solution. Living in awe of God and embracing His love shields us from the pull of sin. When we live with reverence for God, honoring Him in all we do, we're empowered to avoid evil and walk in His ways. Are there areas in your life where you've been ignoring the consequences of sin? Are there paths you're walking that may feel right, but you know deep down they're leading you away from God? Proverbs invites us to face these questions honestly, to acknowledge where we may have strayed and to return to God's mercy. Proverbs reminds us that sin has consequences, but it also teaches us that God's grace is greater than any mistake. Imagine the freedom that comes from walking in alignment with God's wisdom, from choosing the path that leads to life rather than destruction. Proverbs 11:19 promises, "Truly the righteous attain life, but whoever pursues evil finds death." This isn't just about physical life or death. It's about the state of our souls, our hearts, and our relationship with God. In Proverbs, the consequences of sin are serious and unavoidable, but they are not outside of God's control. God's sovereignty means that nothing, no sin, no mistake, no rebellion is beyond His reach. Proverbs teaches us that while sin leads to destruction, God is sovereign over all, orchestrating justice and mercy to work together for His ultimate purpose. Proverbs 16-4 affirms this powerfully. "The Lord works out everything to its proper end, even the wicked for a day of disaster." Here we see a profound truth. God's hand is in everything. Even when we rebel, He is able to turn it all to fulfill His plan. This verse can feel heavy, even unsettling, but it reveals the depth of God's control and His unwavering commitment to justice. God's sovereignty means that sin will not go unchecked. The consequences of our actions unfold within His design, guiding us back to Him or demonstrating the seriousness of living outside His will. Proverbs assures us that no matter how chaotic or broken life appears, God's justice remains, and His purposes are never thwarted by human failure. In Proverbs 3:33-34, we are reminded that the Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but He blesses the home of the righteous. He mocks proud mockers, but shows favor to the humble and oppressed. This paints a picture of God's justice and mercy in action. While sin brings a curse upon those who reject God's ways, humility invites His grace and favor. God's sovereignty ensures that sin's consequences aren't arbitrary or meaningless. They serve a purpose, drawing us toward repentance and showing the contrast between a life aligned with God and a life against Him. One of the most striking aspects of Proverbs' approach to God's sovereignty is its focus on the heart. Proverbs 21:1 says, "In the Lord's hand, the king's heart is a stream of water that he channels toward all who please him. Even the hearts of kings, rulers, and leaders are under God's control." This means that the consequences of sin, whether in our personal lives or at a societal level, are allowed or redirected by God according to His purpose. No sin, no failure. No leader is beyond His influence. God is constantly at work, guiding, correcting, and using every situation, even those resulting from sin, for His glory. Imagine the comfort and reverence that comes from knowing that nothing, not even the consequences of our worst decisions, can derail God's plan. Proverbs 19:21 reminds us, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." This doesn't diminish our responsibility or the impact of sin's consequences, but it reveals God's unshakable sovereignty. Though we may face setbacks, heartbreaks, or consequences from sinful choices, God is always in control, weaving everything into His divine tapestry. In the book of Job, another profound wisdom text, we see a similar theme of God's sovereignty over all things. Job suffers immense loss, yet he acknowledges that even in his suffering, God's sovereignty and purpose remain. Job 42:2 declares, "I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted." Proverbs echoes this, showing us that the consequences of sin and even the trials we face are never outside of God's sovereign reach. But Proverbs doesn't only focus on God's justice, it balances this with the theme of mercy. Proverbs 28:13 assures us, "Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy." God, in His sovereignty, offers a way back for the sinner. He doesn't leave us to suffer the consequences alone. His mercy is available to those who turn back to Him, acknowledging their need for His grace. This mercy doesn't erase the natural consequences of sin, but it redeems them, bringing healing, forgiveness, and restoration to the one who repents. Think about what it means to know that God, in His sovereign power, is also abundantly merciful. Proverbs 3:11-12 tells us, "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent His rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those He loves. As a father, the son He delights in." God's discipline, even when it involves the painful consequences of sin, is motivated by love. He corrects and guides us not to punish, but to restore, leading us back to a path that aligns with His will in His sovereignty. He uses every consequence, every hardship, to refine us, teach us, and deepen our relationship with Him. This is the paradox of Proverbs' teaching on sin and God's sovereignty. While sin brings consequences, God uses even those consequences for our good. He is a God who transforms ashes into beauty, who brings life from death. Proverbs 16:9 captures this beautifully. "In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." Even when we stray, God establishes a way back. He is the God of second chances, of redemption, and of restoration. As we come to the end of this journey through Proverbs, remember this: no failure is final in the hands of a faithful God. What the enemy meant for harm, God can redeem for good. He doesn't just restore, He refines. He doesn't just heal wounds, He transforms them into testimonies. So wherever you are in your walk today, whether you feel strong and steadfast or broken and uncertain, know this: God's wisdom is still calling out, not with condemnation, but with invitation. An invitation to start fresh, to live deeply rooted in truth, and to walk the path that leads to peace. Let Proverbs be more than words on a page. Let it become your daily guide, your quiet counsel, your companion through every decision, joy and trial. Let it form your heart into one that reflects God's love in a world desperate for light. And don't keep this wisdom to yourself. There's someone in your life right now who needs to hear what you've discovered, someone who's been searching, hurting, or simply lost in the noise. Share this with them. Invite them into the beauty and clarity of God's truth. At Deep Bible Stories, we believe Scripture isn't just something we study, it's something we live. So keep returning to these ancient words. Keep letting them shape your mind and spirit. Because the more you dwell in wisdom, the more your life will shine with purpose. Until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep trusting the one who holds all things together. His wisdom will never fail you. Stay encouraged, stay rooted, and above all, stay close to the heart of God. We'll see you in the next story.